It's with great pleasure that I introduce tonight's lecture, which is co-sponsored by the School of Architecture and with SUNY ESF's Department of Landscape Architecture right next door to our school. And tonight's lecturer, who is Ken Smith, a landscape architect, educator, and one of the most important contributors to contemporary landscape architecture's conceptualization and production. We're really lucky to have him here. Ken, a little bit on his background. Ken studied landscape architecture initially at Iowa State, followed by graduate work at Harvard's Graduate School of Design, where he has been a design critic since 1997, with various times off. As a practitioner, he began work in the office of Peter Walker and Martha Schwartz, where he engaged in such projects as the Splice Garden for the roof of the Whitehead Institute in Cambridge, a project that foregrounded techniques that's still evident in his work, such as appropriation and representation of forms and devices from the culture of the discipline. With Martha Schwartz, Ken was the lead designer for Yorkville Park in Toronto, a project recently called by landscape ecologist and planner Nina Marie Lister, a work of designer ecology. Work, and this is her sort of definition of it, work that is not operational per se, in that it does not program, facilitate, or ultimately permit the emergence and evolution of self-organizing, resilient ecological systems, but importantly, plays equally significant roles. It is precisely this sustained and unapologetic interest in landscape's representational role, the symbolic content and expressive power of landscape as an art form that provokes me about Ken's work, especially in a time when preoccupation with landscape's performance is nearing disciplinary exhaustion. Needless to say, Ken runs a critical practice, one that produces built work at varying scales, which explores the norms and conventions of landscape and its associated disciplines. Since opening his office in 1992, this trajectory has intensified through projects such as the Santa Fe Railroad Park, where he deploys ecosystem units, patches of arroyo, bosque, or native grasses organized like sculptural modules, and the Camouflage Garden, which I'm sure you all know, on MoMA's rooftop, which is wholly synthetic. We understand why Smith is considered the discipline's provocateur. Never in the wrong place at the wrong time, Smith nonetheless takes pleasure in what critic John Beardsley calls, and I'm quoting him, applying things in the wrong place in the wrong way. And I think we'll see this in his work tonight. And that phrase is in the introduction to Ken's new monograph that's written by John Beardsley, and I wanted to invite you after the lecture to a reception and a book signing downstairs. So please join me in welcoming Ken Smith and his lecture, Losers. Thank you.
Nice. So tonight is Losers. This is, you'll bear with me, this is the first time I've done this lecture. We've been practicing since
I should turn off the mic.
Is that better? Okay. It was a project that we wanted to be provocative about how you think about Times Square sort of our sense was that everybody always tries to add more stuff to Times Square, and it's very hard to compete with all that noise and all that stuff that's there. And so we proposed to add more stuff, but do it through the process of subtraction, and to do a video about everything expressed as a kind of void. And of course we lost, but that was expected. And it was all done stupidly in SketchUp. It was a SketchUp video. So when I was in graduate school in the mid '80s, this guy was, you know, the big monkey, and when I moved to New York City to work in Martha's office on Crosby Street in Soho, when you walked around Soho in those days, you saw this book popping out of about every third person's back pocket, because it had a tremendous impact on the art world, and this whole notion of appropriation and redeployment that was going on at that time. And it had an impact on architecture as well. And it's a book that I've actually gone back and reread a number of times over the years. And it's something that interests me because of the issues of representation and content and symbolism, and how you deal with issues of abstraction and content in work. And it's a kind of relevant issue for landscape architecture, because landscape architecture has always been burdened by nature and how to deal with nature. Are we making nature? Well, probably not. We might deploy systems of nature, some operations of nature, processes of nature. We oftentimes play around with the image of nature, but sometimes not very well, or maybe mostly not very well. And so these issues of how you deal with representation of nature in landscape architecture is something I'm kind of preoccupied with. And Baudrillard, you know, this he talks about simulation, and I'll just summarize it. This is the Wikipedia version for you guys. He talks about there's three types of simulation. There's what he calls the first order is the pre-modern, and that's really quite literally a copy, a fairly literal copy of something, what it looks like. And then during modernity, he defines a second type of simulation, which really comes out of mass production and the reproduction in art, and certainly in architecture and landscape architecture. You can see that in all the work of minimalism and seriality. I mean, Peter Walker's work is basically squarely in this period. And then in the third phase, in post-modernity, it's a little more abstract, because I guess we're in it, so it's harder to define something when you're in the middle of it. But he talks about it as being dealing with the execution of models and systems. And I think clearly the production that we're involved in architecture and design and art and landscape these days, with all of the use of computers and algorithms and things, means that we're actually executing a lot of things that really are quite synthetic. That even things that seem like they're real, like ecological restoration, are based on models that are based on scientific principles. It's quite a bit of abstraction, and then you actually execute a model in real space. And so it's this kind of execution or application of models that he describes as this third form of simulation. So the first loser tonight deals with appropriation and displacement. And the first loser is the Boston Botanical Garden. It was an idea competition that I did soon after I started working with Martha Schwartz, and it's a project I did with Marta Fry in San Francisco. That's the site, post-industrial, industrial kind of, ugly site with highways and asphalt and crap And I'm always reminded, you know, when Dan Kiley used to give a lecture, he always would show the first project he ever did, and he would say as a young designer, I threw everything into it, you know, and he made a point, you kind of learn to edit with time. And I look back on this, and everything's there. But that's what it was about. And so it's digital logic plus French gardens plus minimalism plus constructivism plus highways plus industrial chic equal the Boston Botanical Garden. And it came, I had just gotten back from my tour of Lenote Gardens in France when I did this. And it was the idea of creating a new kind of botanical garden, a set of collections. And appropriating all over the place here. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are stolen from every kind of place. That's the highway, which becomes a garden mount. Those are the conservatories. Some little theme garden, some hedge gardens, and that was that. And then I filed it away for 20 years, and just recently came across it again. But it was an important project for me in thinking about the Yorkville Park, because Boston Botanical Garden was 1998 and Yorkville was 1990, 2 years later. And it's a more serious project and also a competition. And it's built, and it's now over 15 years old, and it's well maintained. They've done some restoration work. It's much loved, I'm told, by people who live in Toronto, and it seems to have stood the test of time. And it starts out with the notion of the collection. I mean, that's the basis of the botanical garden, is that as we travel, we collect things, objects, and ideas, and we bring them home and we redeploy them. And so this is very squarely in the tradition of appropriation and redeployment. That's Mark Dion, whose work I very much admire. And the project starts out with a set of classic landscape painting images of Ontario, the group of 7 from the teens and the 20s. And the proposition was to take these classic icons and to take the component features and then to put them into a series of collection boxes within this park. So that's the concept diagram, and then that's the site plan. The big feature is this large bedrock formation. It's really a very straightforward strategy. We took the footprints of the little buildings and drug them across and created a series of plots, and then threaded with walkways and spaces for social interaction. That was the site. It's really quite small. It's 1 acre in size. You can see it's 60 feet wide and some 300 or so feet long. And it sits on top of the subway. It's a vacant site because when they built the subway in Toronto in the 50s, they ripped all this down. This is the old neighborhood, and then the Bloor corridor has become a corridor of contemporary architecture. And the site really needed to deal with both this and this. That was the competition montage. And not me? Okay. It doesn't like me, I can tell. and this is what it looks like today. This is a Peter Moss photograph from just a couple years ago. And the park really has grown in, and you can see there's people everywhere in this park. It may not be an operationally ecological park, but it is an operationally social park. And the big feature was this bedrock that we heroically moved into the site. At 700 tons, it was moved 150 miles, I think 7 or 8 flatbed trucks. And it was literally taken apart. They inventoried it, you know, E6 sits next to E7, and they, as faithful as they could, put it back together. And it sits on top of the subway, so it has a really humongous, heroic grade beam underneath it, which of course you can't see. And it was controversial when we were under construction. It was during an election year, and the local politicians all made fun of the expenditure of, I think it was $350,000, you know, that they found this, and that they thought that was really obscene. But the city officials had backbone. They stuck with it. It was built, and it's a real landmark. People, if you talk to people in Toronto and you tell them, "I'll meet you at the Rock," everybody knows what that is. I was young enough then that I didn't consult with my liability insurance provider. You know, it'd probably be hard to do this today. And then there's a series of other features. There's a rain curtain that threads through the park. And the park is really set up spatially as a series of layered spaces, which make that little acre seem much bigger than it is, and actually allow it to have a lot of people in it and still have a sense that you are by yourself in some ways, which is very nice. This is the little piece of wetland with a boardwalk. Built-in seating everywhere. This is the I-beam arbor. And you get a sense of sort of the social spaces and how it doesn't have a lot of benches. Actually, it doesn't have a single bench in the park, but there's loads of places to sit. And it also works in the winter. The fountain was designed as an icicle fountain, and it's been operating all these years, and it still works. And sculpturally, the rock and the other features look good in the snow. And it sort of ebbs and it sort of comes and goes through the course of the winter. So that's that one. Loser number 2 is simulation. Not as well known as the built version. There was a proposal that was rejected by the residential condominium board next door, because the purpose of the roof garden at MoMA was to provide a decorative rooftop. MoMA had a contractual obligation to the Museum Tower condominium that they wouldn't have to look down on black asphalt roof. And so they had veto rights, and they didn't like the first scheme. It was too fake. So look what they got instead. So this is the first scheme. It was kind of a hybrid between minimalism and pop. It's kind of a serial operation color field that you could look down upon, made out of pinwheel daisies. The curators loved it, and I made the mistake of, I don't know if there may be a picture of the model, but this was the detailing, conceptual detailing. That was a mock-up, and I made the mistake of actually taking a small version of the mock-up up into the apartment of the head of the co-op board, and so they're sitting there looking at these fake flowers, kind of, and up and close, and they said, "We don't like it. We don't think it's appropriate." So then it actually took me about 6 months to come up with the next version. But in the meantime, I decided I would do it somewhere else. And so that was about the time that Chris Hoagie called me up. He was doing an installation program in in California. And so I pitched the idea to them, and he liked it. And luckily, this was a site that had a lot of wind, and so it was very appropriate here. It's all appropriated stuff. It's the clamps from tube and clamp scaffolding is plastic pipes, the Excelsior erosion control mat. I mean, everything could be ordered online. It was all very straightforward stuff. And the detailing was exquisite. And one of the things I learned from, that is exquisite detailing. One of the things I learned from Peter Walker was that the more outrageous an idea is, the more worked out the details need to be. You have to be really solid in the execution of something that's wild. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And I spent weeks figuring that out. And it took me a long time to find that little implement, that little set screw. And that's what then made it work. There were all sorts of studies on how to attach this to that. And it's still there. The irony is, last summer we were restoring it. And you can no longer buy these pinwheel daisies. So we actually went through a whole exercise of talking to Chinese companies to see if we could have new ones custom made. And then eventually we found a lot of them in some warehouse, unsold lot that we were able to use for restoration. So then the version 2 is the version that was built. And so I said, well, if the first one was too synthetic, too artificial, the next time I'm going to fly under the radar. I'll do a sort of concept. I'll do camouflage, and we'll just kind of hide our true intentions and take it through. Can you hear that?
In his view, a garden is in a sense an artistic construction. A virtue of necessity, where the soil can generally only be found under the concrete. For himself in both the art and the garden science series with his youth garden for the Museum of Modern Art. It was a contract with conditions that were at first sight anything other than attractive.
What the issue or the conditions, and they said, second they said I couldn't have any water, no irrigation, because they didn't want any leaks in the galleries below, and therefore they didn't want any live plants. They'd already bought black rocks and white rocks, and if I could use those, that would be good. And then I asked about the budget. And they told me that the budget was actually quite modest also. And so it was very constrained. But actually the constraints were in some way liberating because it meant that there was no way I could do a conventional garden.
The Norma roof garden followed an old New Yorker tradition of the so-called garden for you that could be enjoyed by people who either lived or walked above it. And the optical illusions that Ken Smith has created can only be seen for what they really are when you get close up.
Box and scale, the boxwoods. I mean, you don't really know looking at it if the boxwood is a shrub. Rock is big and small. It's camouflage, so it's hiding something, but when you do look at it, it's highly visible. So it doesn't really hide the roof at all. So there's a lot of kind of double meanings and So it occupies two roofs, the two ninth floor roofs over the new galleries, and then there's also a piece of it up over a mechanical roof on the 16th floor. And this is what it looked like soon after it was finished. And it started from these skateboarder pants that my wife Priscilla bought on Canal Street. And the first version was literally a Xerox that you see above. And then it went through a translation because even though I'm into appropriation, I thought that actually a straightforward Xerox was too literal, and I wanted to transform it in a way. And so it was transformed through a series of reductive geometries, 3 radiuses, this kind of T intersection, a splayed condition, and a straight segment. And that's the construction document. And this was a mock-up that we did to test out the geometry on the roof. This was how we do product research in my office. I mean, well, that's how it's done now, right? Everybody does it this way. And we actually order stuff online. We order stuff from Amazon for our projects, and it's just the nature of the world we live in. This was the early material palette layout, and this is under construction. These are the foam headers. They were all CNC produced, so that they're very accurate according to the construction documents, and there's a high degree of precision to the site. The fiberglass grating was all CNC cut also. In my office, we spent a lot of time on site during construction. That's Matt Landis. He was working on the project. He was on site every single day, and I came up every second or third day during construction. This project was actually built fairly quickly. And that's what it looked like when it was finished. And I think that the thing that kind of interested me about this was the fact that landscape architecture is actually a profession of camouflage. We actually, as a profession, are very good camoufleurs. We don't talk about it professionally. I've never once been to an ASLA conference where they had a symposium on camouflage. But in fact, it's something that we all do. The polite terms are contextualization, making it blend in with its edges. Or in remediation, we are oftentimes following guidelines to return it to its original state so that the scar or maybe the poison that's embedded in the landscape remains invisible to people, and we can be in denial about what's actually there. We very commonly service architects in hiding the blemishes of their buildings and covering up the fire hydrants and the mechanical vaults and all that stuff so that people don't have to look at that stuff. And so we actually spend much of our professional lives camouflaging things we never talk about in a serious way. And so I actually thought that it's a subject that we really should take more seriously. And as a profession, we shouldn't be ashamed of being camoufleurs, and we should actually excel at that practice. Another view of that. This is a viewing garden. It's not a garden you can actually go visit. It's made out of crushed glass, fiberglass grating, PVC pipes and flanges, artificial boxwood, crushed marble chips, artificial stones, recycled rubber, and styrofoam. Okay, loser number 3, revealing water. It's very difficult in making a landscape to reveal the process of what you're working with. It's very easy conceptually to present the ideas to people that I want to reveal the process of the making or the bone structure of the place. But by the time you get through the client process and the contracting process, it's very hard to actually pull that stuff off. And so the first one, the Loser, was a project for the East River waterfront that I did with Kennedy and Violich in 1999, 2000, 2001. Parts of it got built, but the water part that I was working on did not get built. This is my site. This is a bulkhead in New York City. This is the tidal zone of the East River, and so this is the ecology of seawall. And the proposition was to actually put in something that was gradated and engaged in the tidal flux of the river. So the first version of this, this is the concept model, was to create a series of collection boxes. This is like Yorkville, of course. And then to have a series of windmills and pumps and to actually create an artificial ecology with Spartina grass. And that was the view of the first version. And then the second version became much more porous. It has a structure that actually would allow the tidal influence to move through it and actually engage the constructed slopes of the piece. And this was the model of that. And so you can see low tide and high tide, and you can see how the piece would actually be participatory in the tidal zone of the East River. And then this was the final version, working with the structural engineers and working with the kind of realities of the kind of piles and piers that you need to have in the river. But it still had the same basic structure of a low tide and a high tide. And there was also an irrigation system that would assist in the flooding of the piece. And that's what the project looked like. We took it all the way through construction documents, but we were unable to get the environmental permits that were necessary to do the piece. So, loser. So now I'm working on, that project was up here. Now I'm working on East River waterfront. This is the Battery Marine Terminal. This is the financial district. This is the Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge. And so we're doing 1.5 miles of Esplanade, Pier 15 and Pier 35. I'm working with Shop Architects and Arup. And we have two pieces of engagement of the water that we've been successful in. The first is a get down. We actually were able to get the necessary environmental permits to breach the seawall and to put an occupiable set of steps down into the water. And you can see it actually does engage the water. It floods. There will be a railing here. We were successful with the environmental agencies, but we were not successful with the city's risk management people. But even with the railing, you'll still have a sense of the water. And then the other piece that we're working, this is Pier 15. This is a large vine screen feature, and there's a folded landscape of occupiable lawns and some dunes. And then we also got a permit to breach the structure here and to create a small ecological demonstration. The city got a DEP or a grant to fund this. And we're actually creating an artificial mussel slope that is tidal and will support a colony of bivalves. And then we also have some upland wetland species that would be appropriate for that same feature. And that's what it looks like. It's really quite small, but we're working with ecologists on this and spending a lot of time on understanding the kind of surfaces that we need to provide so that the mussels are happy and will attach themselves. And that's what it will look like. There's a bridge across it, and it's one of the few places in Manhattan where you'll actually be able to see the tide and understand the influence of the tide on the ecology of the site. And then the related project, also dealing with revealing water, is the park in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I lied. It's not loser winner, loser winner. There's two winners on this one, but it's a good project. This is a project that I did with Mary Miss, the artist, and Fred Schwartz, the architect. It's in the old industrial district of Santa Fe. It's outside of the historic district because Santa Fe is a very historically conscious town, but they haven't historically valued the industrial era. And for us, that was actually good because it meant that we weren't bound by the historic regulations, which are really geared toward the Pueblo style and adobe. And that actually would have been inappropriate here. This is a new water tank that we put in. This is the symbolic part and also a functional part of our water harvesting system. Santa Fe gets 13 inches of rain a year. Syracuse must get, what, 50 inches? 36? A lot of rain here. And so water is a real issue in Santa Fe, and the park program was geared around water harvesting. This is the historic plaza, if you know Santa Fe. This is the Santa Fe River, and this is that district, the park, the old rail yard. This is the farmer's market. Here's the site. You can see, even here, you can see the residual lines of the old the siding yards of the rails. You can see these old warehouses really follow the alignment of the old sidings, something that we made a point of making much more visible as a result of the park features. And this is the park plan, some of the principal features. And this is what the site looked like in the 1930s. This is an archival photograph. And this is a mapping of the rail sidings in the area. And this is Site Santa Fe. This is the Gross Kelly building. This is the historic depot. So these buildings now are art galleries. This is an art museum. There's a teen center here. The Museo Cultural, which is a museum, is located here. And so this is now really the center of a cultural district in Santa Fe. And so there were two principal points of discussion we had on this project. Santa Fe is a very community active place. You don't do anything in Santa Fe without talking about it a lot over some period of time. And so we had a very long discussion about these railroad tracks because I thought they were important. When I went to the site, I'm sorry I don't have the photograph, but when I went to the site, I could see these lines of Siberian elm trees on the site. And they actually were the lines between the backs of the old buildings and the rail lines. They were basically the uncared for leftover spaces in the site. And these lines of trees marked the geometry of when the site was an active rail yard or a post-active rail yard. But there were a number of people in the community who felt that straight lines were inappropriate for Santa Fe. Santa Fe was not a place of straight lines. It was not part of the aesthetic and the mythology of Santa Fe. And they said that Santa Fe is a place of curving lines. And they thought that we should remove these things. And my argument was that this is actually the specific history of the site. And we should actually commemorate the specific history of the site and not a made-up history of the site. And actually, in the end, that was an argument that prevailed, and we were able to keep these alignments in the park. But it was a very interesting discussion that we had over a series of months. The other interesting discussion was about this, and this is the Acequia Madre. This is a 400-year-old, still in operation irrigation ditch. And I think it's really beautiful. It's dirt. It's about 4 feet deep, and it's maybe 8 feet wide, and it's humble. And it's dirt, and it's still operational because every year for 400 years, this guy or his, somebody like this guy, the mayor domo, who's the principal land owner and beneficiary of the acequia, organizes the other beneficiaries, and they come together for a day of community work, and they clean the ditch. And this is the current ditch commissioner. This is Phil Bove. This is my client, Brian Drypolcher. And the discussion we had about the ditch was that there were people who felt that the ditch should be improved, that we should, do some stone work along the edges, that, it really wasn't, it's just, it wasn't nice enough for a public park. And so we had a very long discussion about that. The design team argued that it's authentically a dirt ditch. It's been working fine for 400 years, and we should keep it as a dirt ditch because it's beautiful and it speaks to the history of the place. Phil was a great ally. Phil basically said, over my dead body, is it going to be anything but a dirt ditch? And because we agreed to keep it a dirt ditch, Phil had 1/4 acre of water rights that was available that he gave to us so that we could do some water demonstration projects in the park. This is the Acequia madre after we finished construction. Part of the problem are these Siberian elm trees. These are invasive species. If you didn't have Siberian elms in Santa Fe, it'd be a very unshady place. But these are a real problem. They throw off a lot of seeds, and they're invasive. And we had a long discussion about this. The ecologist, which I agree with, that's an invasive species, felt that we should just remove them all during construction. I argued that it would be very unkind to the public to cut down all the trees in the park. And so I argued that we should keep them for now. We planted 75 cottonwood trees to create a cottonwood bosque, which is a traditional landscape typology in New Mexico. And as the cottonwoods grow, and I have to tell you they're growing really fast, we can start selectively removing trees. And when I was out there just a couple of months ago meeting with my client, Brian Drypolcher, he was saying that he thought that we probably could start to remove some of these elm trees, that the park was growing in fast enough at this point. So this is the basis for the project. This is the water budget, something we don't really have to deal with in the Northeast so much. But the project was predicated on harvesting water from the roofs of all of the cultural buildings in the rail yard. And so we calculated the volume of water that we would have, and that became the basis for how green our park could be. And we actually could collect enough water that we could create a landscape that would be a little bit greener than the normal landscape around the site. And our goal was to make the water delivery systems as visible as we could. And I would say we got about 50% of that. We were not entirely successful, but we did pretty good. This is the central water tank, and these are a series of gabion walls that I'll show you later. And it basically works like this. This is water quantity. You need as much water as you can get. And this is treatment cost, and you want to get it as cheaply as you can. And so the locals told me that permaculture was the best way to do that, and they were right. And permaculture is the way that you get the most water, harvested water, and at the least cost. When we started the project, the soil engineer, the soil report came back and concluded that the soils had the porosity of asphalt on the site, which meant that all the water was leaving the site. And so we worked with Garn Wallace, who's a soil scientist in California, and we improved the soil, we perforated the soils, we worked to make the soils more porous to hold water, and we created catchments throughout the park. So the goal was to keep every bit of the 13 inches of rain that fell the site on the site. And then roof water was actually a very good source of fairly economical water, although out of our $10.5 million budget, we spent $1 million on the water harvesting system. So we spent about 10% of the budget on this infrastructure. And then the key part was really having a plant palette that made sense. So there's native plants form the backbone of the park. The cottonwoods, the pinyon pines, the junipers, the privet, the ponderosa pines, and all of that. And then overlaid on that is a broader palette of xeracre adapted plants. They're not all native, but they're plants that do well there, they're appropriate. And then overlaid on that are some areas of cultural plantings. And these are the plantings that are imports, things like the roses and the hollyhocks and the irises, things that people love, and they're part of the history of the culture. So they had a place in the park. So this is the water tank. This is the market day with the farmer's market. This shade structure that Fred Schwartz designed catches the water. There's a visible gutter, visible canales, and then from this downspout, the water drops into this visible blue circle and into a visible drain so that you can understand the collection of the water from the site. And we have as many visible canales throughout the site as we can to help make that connection. There's also a fairly substantial underground storage system to supplement the water supply. And this is what the site looked like when we started. And you can see this was the original terrain, largely flat. This is the Acequia Madre. And we quite dramatically changed the topography of the site to create a very large catchment area. And the large catchment area then has small catchment areas. And there are small catchments woven throughout the site to hold the water. And we also used gabion walls to capture water and to help infiltrate it into the soils. So this is a view of the grade change. This is the gabion wall. You can see how much we changed the site, some porous paving. This whole area down here is what in the northeast would be a great lawn is a field of crusher fines. It's a big field of dirt. And it's really quite beautiful, and it's a kind of space that's very used in a place like Santa Fe. This is the bike trail, that's the rail yard. Another view of that. The park is all dark sky lighting. The city has a dark sky ordinance. So we have a first generation high test German dark sky light that we used for the first time in the United States. We used a very simple palette of wood, steel, gabion, gravel, and stone throughout the park. It's a very straightforward, durable, humble palette. But it's got a crispness to it and a beauty to it. This is the Acequia Madre. So this is where Phil Bove comes back in. This is his quarter-acre foot of water. And so over here is the Acequia Madre, and there's a demonstration garden here, and the water comes down this channel, the Acequia Nina. And there's 2 gates here. You close this gate and open this gate, and the water floods into a demonstration area here, which is to demonstrate the Spanish colonial way of crops. And this is what that looked like this past summer. And this is what it looked like before. You can see this is the catchment. You can see the water fills the area. It soaks into the ground. And then when it's done, then it comes back into this visible space, and then it goes through a pipe to the Acequia Madre. So you can actually see the passage of the irrigation water coming through the park. You can see the controls, the gates and things. You can see the flood operations in process. A little bit of grass in the park, not very much. The material palette again. There's a few structures. This is a ramada. This is a social gathering place. Has porch swings, these guys. A rose garden, and then a sedum garden with recycled glass. This is the long ramada. This will be a shade structure. Already, I was there a month ago, and already the trumpet vines are just starting to come over the top of this. And this is the other demonstration garden. This is a waffle garden. The This is the Royal up here. And this is an abstraction of a Native American irrigation process of creating small catchments carved out of soil. And how this one works is that there's an inlet. The inlet is right here from the Acequia Madre. The water comes in. It moves through this channel. You see there's the gate. There's Brian Drypolter again. This is Elizabeth Asawa, the senior associate in my office in New York. And you can see that we're field flooding this whole area. And once all these cells are filled up, then we'll open the gate. The water stays in these and it percolates into the soil. And then you can plant the seeds a few days later. And then the water moves down the Acequia Nina and then to the other demonstration area. Some of the materials, these planks have porous concrete between them. This was, I think, the first use of porous concrete in Santa Fe. We're actually using a lot of porous concrete now in projects for permeability. And these are those rail tracks that we put back. So the last loser is one on repurposing. This was a project we presented. I worked with Jim Conti, a lighting designer. This is an artist invited competition. We presented it 6 weeks ago and didn't hear anything back from the client for a very long period of time. And then when we did hear back, they had decided to put the project on hold and rethink their program. So we blew up the process. This is for, they wanted a small entertainment event space adjacent to the greenhouses. And so we pitched this as the role of aircraft in botanical gardens, both in expeditions and collecting and in aerial surveillance and mapping, and talking about sort of the important way that airplanes in modern society have had an impact on our understanding of the botany of the world and the risks to the botany of the world. And then we also talked about the huge problem we have of the boneyards of dead airplanes in the desert and what to do with these aircraft. And so we proposed to repurpose a Boeing 767. It's a very nice aircraft. It's pretty big. And that we would use it to create a space for intimate dinner parties and gala receptions. Yeah, we forget about how glamorous flight once was, but it really was sexy, and also the cabin of an aircraft is really quite big, and it used to be that people got dressed up to fly airplanes, and it used to be that there were beautiful lounges on the aircraft, and it was a cool thing. And so this is our aircraft. It's roomy enough. We're going to rip the chairs out and that apparatus and open the thing up. These were our studies for deploying dining tables and cocktail tables for different configurations to show that it was a good, viable place for events. This is, of course, what they look like. This is what we think that the event would look like, and that it would be a celebrated space, and people would feel cool there. And then we were going to have an overlook space, a kind of martini bar on the wing, and then we were going to tent in the under wing area so that we could have the additional capacity that we needed for the size of the crowds that they want to have. And that's how it would set. And then we were going to repurpose baggage carts for the coat check and the bar and everything. And that's what the site plan looked like. The view, the elevation. This was a formal LA, the entrance to the garden, so this becomes a kind of monumental gateway. And this is the night view of an event. The runway lights that we would embed in the botanical garden. and I just, for the life of me, can't imagine why it lost, but. But if experience tells me anything, it is that it's going to come back, and we'll do something like it somewhere. So that's the presentation. We'll do book signing afterwards. I'd be glad to answer any questions or take any comments, positive or negative, that you might have. So thank you.
So if you would take a few questions.
Sure. Any
If you
questions?
stick around, there's a reception.
Yes.
In one of the last slides that you shown for the DDG 767 project,
Yeah.
when you were showing the importance, of the aircraft in mechanical
Exploration. Yeah.
I noticed that, I wasn't sure what it was, but you had like an infrared photography picture or something, that bright
Right.
red almost
Yeah.
photograph. Did you guys explore it all and plan materials of making like the landscape look like those?
Oh, color IR garden. That's a good idea. No, I didn't. That didn't occur to me. That's a good one. So beware. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're dark sky, so they're first of all, they're very energy efficient. They're high performance, but they're cutoff lights. So basically, all the light is projected down onto the surface of the ground, and very little of the light is actually broadcast up into the atmosphere. And Santa Fe is actually a very dark city. When you spend time in Santa Fe at night, it's really quite dark. The sky is there's military installations around, so keeping the sky visible is important, and also it's very beautiful. So the city, I think Santa Fe had one of the first ordinances requiring dark sky lighting in the country. It's the state of the art now. It's something that you're going to do on all your projects going forward.
One more.
Yeah. Okay.
I couldn't help but thinking when you were talking about Yorkville Park and the labors of bringing in authentic piece of rock outcropping.
Right.
About starting with Baudrillard and kind of the relationship in your work between when something
Right.
and whether or not that comes from a budget or from client, from site, from all of those. But how do you, because when you get to Santa Fe, you're kind of looking for that.
Yeah.
Where's the line that you're making when you're thinking about the work? Back in Toronto.
Well, in Toronto,
Why the
yeah.
authentic rock? Why the labor of the thing itself?
Well, actually, there were when we did the competition, we didn't know how to price the rock, and so we actually priced a fake rock, and that became the budget for the real rock. But the real rock was better. Authentic rock was better, even though it's now a fake rock in many ways. And Baudrillard's argument is, and this is a dystopian thing, I think, for him, is that the simulation displaces the real. And so clearly it calls into question, I mean, is it a real rock or a synthetic rock? I mean, I think it's a real rock, although it's oddly sitting over top of a subway station, and so it does make you question that. But there's a lot of synthetic stuff that's done as a matter of routine, which pretends to be real in a very unquestioning way. And to me, that's much more dishonest because it's not open about what it actually is. And I think in Santa Fe, I think that the stuff has enough structure, it's clearly cultural. The Asakias are cultural. The plant communities are organized in a cultural way. The spaces are cultural. So I mean, I think even though it's all natural materials and a lot of native plants, I mean, it's a really, I mean, it's a project Andrew Progon could show and talk about nature, but it operates in a different way. It's the same program, but it's expressed differently, and that's sort of my interest. So, thank you.
The reception and book signing are on the first floor.
Yeah, buy a book.